Pregame.com.
Welcome back to Pregame.tv. I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo, joined by Ken Thomson. We're going to break down Friday night action. It's a big one, Indiana and Miami. Ken, we touched upon it in the last video that 10 days ago, this was like a moot point. It was like Indiana wrapped it up when they had their statement game. Indiana was struggling, limping to the wire. Miami was closing a gap, but then they won at home, got that win by 2 points, I believe, in another low-scoring game, and that gave them the 3-game lead. But it also gave them the tiebreaker because they beat Miami for the season series. So it was basically, with 2 weeks to play, they had it wrapped up. Boy, how things have changed in the last 2 weeks since that last meeting.
Let me get your take on the end of the Brooklyn-Miami game with Plumlee stuffing LeBron. And you watch and you'll see like their fingers actually intertwine. But when the ball is stuck to the hand, you know, they're going to say the ball is part of the hand. So when LeBron sees it on the big screen, that's when he starts, you know, let me just ask you this, LeBron. If you had stuffed Plumlee that way to end a game, do you think there would have been a call? No, there's no way. Yeah. So I like to see that as big as LeBron is, that the refs let it go. And I just think that's a first because we have not seen that as far as these marquee players.
Superstars get the benefit of the doubt.
Always.
Michael Jordan used to travel on half of his.
Please. He did get called 3 times in the Knicks series for carrying. But that the old flu game, man, I still can't get over that. Yeah, he's doubtful. Yeah, doubtful. 63 points later, doubtful.
You take things serious when they beat your sports team.
We're still waiting for Charles Smith to put that layup in.
Yeah. How about the old Spike Lee and, you know, the Reggie Miller game?
Reggie Miller with the push in the back on Starks, but he got away with it. What the heck? You know, like Belichick says, look, if you hold on every play or pass interfere every play, they can't call it every play. What the heck?
All right, back to this one. I mean, let's talk about this demise of the Pacers. Now, again, we're taping on Thursday. Mm-hmm. Wednesday night, they gutted out a win at Milwaukee. A month ago, they're blowing out a Milwaukee team. Last night, it goes down to the final possession.
With no starters, though. None of the starters played.
They rested a lot of people, which I got to ask you, if you're fighting for the home court, why are you resting everybody in winnable ball games that last night, that game shouldn't even have been close, and it went down to the final shot. The game was tied with 5 seconds left.
Yeah, Copeland came up big, but somebody made a good point. They said, what if the starters played and lost to Milwaukee? What is the psyche of the team then? At least if they do lose without any of the starters playing, they've got that little deal there where they say, well, the starters didn't play. But you can't just try and pull a page out of Popovich's book. It's a different team, different chemistry. And right now, let's face it, over the last month, the chemistry for Indiana has been piss poor. It's been the worst in the NBA. They're scoring, 89 points a game? It's a joke.
Yeah, they're lucky if they're scoring 89 points a game. They've got games in this stretch where Memphis held them to 71, Chicago held them to 77. Cleveland, how do you only score 76 points against Cleveland, 78 against Washington? They've got a serious offensive problem, and when they do face teams like we mentioned, Chicago, in Brooklyn that plays defense, they're going to have some problems. And this is a team that could end up being, whichever way it goes, a 1 or 2 seed. They could get upset. You never see, the top seeds getting upset in the first round. But the way they're playing, I can't put the money that you would see on a 1 versus an 8 or a 2 versus a 7. I don't know about you.
No, if Indiana, to me, does not get that first seed, because then they'll play Atlanta more than likely. And if you look at the Knicks' last 4 games, they got 2 against Toronto. They got Chicago at home, no gimme. And then they have another tough road game. They are at Brooklyn, right. And Brooklyn would love nothing better than to be that elimination game to get the Knicks out of there. So I look at Atlanta being the 8th seed. And I think Indiana, if they're the 1 and they have that momentum picking up the 1, that they can roll Atlanta. I don't see any competition there. But if they're 2 and they have to go against Washington, who now has slipped behind Charlotte, even though they're tied, but they lost that game head-to-head with Charlotte, I think Washington can take them out, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. Any of the matchups would give them problems except the Atlanta. But Atlanta went in last Sunday to Indiana and absolutely embarrassed the Pacers. I mean, that score, when I saw the first score of the game, I had to check another score source, thinking that it was a typo, and it wasn't. They're just pitiful.
It's sad to see him score in the 20s at halftime of a game at home. I mean, it's a joke, and I feel sorry for Vogel. I don't know where along the season that he's lost a team, but there's one thing you hate to see is a big 7-foot-plus guy that's 280 pounds pouting and whining and crying, and Roy Hibbert's been that guy. Just keep it between you. Sure, you're going to go through some tough times. Every team will, but keep it in the locker room. Don't get it out there. You don't need the dissension amongst the troops.
Now, if you don't want to see a big guy pouting, don't go with me to a buffet when they run out of crab.
Yeah, or Leonard.
All right, you know what? We danced around this one enough. Let's make it official.
Yeah, and this is one that I didn't even have to write down any stats. I mean, we all know these two teams by heart. We know Indiana, we knew Miami. But when Indiana had that 3-game lead, when they got the win by a point against Miami, everybody thought, okay, home court, Indiana's got it. They've got some momentum now to build on. And like Marco said, we watched them fall apart. Miami, they haven't played the greatest ball, but you know they're smarting after 2 straight losses. They blew a lead that they had for 3 3/4 at Memphis, always a tough place to play, especially when Memphis was in a must-win situation. And then again, the game where Plumlee blocks LeBron at the end. Miami had the lead by 3, but squandered that down the stretch at home. So they'll be focused. This game's in Miami, and Miami's going to be like, look, let's set the record straight. When you come into Miami in the postseason, if you get that far, you will not beat us. Am I a Heat fan? Heck no, I can't stand this team, but I've got to understand that this team can turn it on more so than an Indiana Pacer team. And again, I don't see the Pacers turning it on. I'll be surprised if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'll really be surprised whether they're home or whether they're on the road. If they are home and they get this win on this Friday night, then I think they'll take out Atlanta, and then they could have a decent postseason. But if they lose this game and Miami takes care of business, and we look, Indiana's got the 3 games left at Miami, Oklahoma City, no gimme at home the way they're playing, and then they close out Orlando. Should get a win there, but Orlando, it's going to be that last game, want to give something to the fans, got to sell tickets, never know. We saw Orlando bite Brooklyn, like Marco said, 115-111 last night. Miami, on the other hand, Indiana, then at Atlanta, at Washington, they close with Philly. So they got the cupcake at home if they need it, the little ace in the hole, but they are a half game behind the Pacers right now. They're tied in the loss column. That's key. So that's why I think this is it. Statement game. Miami takes care of business in a big way. LeBron will have one of these monster games, and I think the rest of the team will be fired up. The place will be jumping. Why? Because they sit back on their hands in South Beach. They don't have to really root during the regular season. Now this is a game that actually matters in the regular season. I think you'll see a sellout crowd go crazy, go nuts from at least the second quarter on, and I think Miami extends the lead, wins it by double digits. They won't lay more than this in that game, and I like Miami big time. I think they roll by double digits, Marco.
Yeah, I can't argue with anything you said. The way that Indiana's scoring right now, you got to think that this is going to be a playoff atmosphere, a low-scoring game. Both teams bringing the defensive intensity, so under might be a play, to look as well. The one thing I'm going to ask you, you said, and I hear everybody say this about the Miami Heat, they're a team that can turn it on. If they're a team that can turn it on, they've lost 3 of their last 4 games, where they had the number 1 seed in their grasp to put it away, that this game wouldn't matter. That's the only thing that concerns me, is they weren't able to go out and take care of business. Losing to a Minnesota at home should not happen. The Memphis game last night, that's a different story, because it is a team that is in life or death trying to make the playoffs. And when we say a team, life or death to try to make the playoffs, this is how good the West is. You've got a Memphis team that right now, if you transplanted them to the Eastern Conference, they may not make the playoffs in the West, but they would be tied for the number 3 seed in the East.
And they probably have a good chance to come out of the East. And what I said, too, was that Miami can turn it on more so than Indiana can. So I agree with you. Miami, if they could turn it on and off as easily as flicking the switch, they would have already wrapped up the best record. Once they got Indiana to drop that 3-game lead, they would have taken care of business without having to go this far and take care of business Friday. But they put their backs against the wall, and we've seen them do that, and they've done it in the postseason, and they've come through in flying colors. So that's why I think they can turn it on more than Indiana. But I'll tell you what, Chicago and Brooklyn, like you said. Those two teams are relevant. So the East, like we thought it was going to be a foregone conclusion, Indiana, Miami, that's all it is. Now it's not. Indiana, to me, is the fifth team maybe, or the fourth or fifth team out of the East that I would look at. I would definitely look at Chicago number 2 and Brooklyn number 3 because of their success 4-0 against Miami and, of course, their playoff experience, bringing those guys in from the Celtics.
And the team that can be dangerous on any night, Toronto's, is not going to be a tough.
That's a good call.
Not going to be an easy out. Okay, there you have it. It's going to be a war on Friday night. Talk about playoff atmosphere. This one will have it. It might have like a Game 7 type feel because basically that's what they're playing for, is possibly the home court. All right, we're going to come back next after such a premier game on Friday night. Indiana, Miami. What can we do for an encore?
What do we got?
We got Utah at Denver. That's up next. Pregame.tv.